to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and man, after all that Andrew Tate stuff, I kind of wanted to take it easy for this next one. Focus on, for one, something I'm far more passionate about, which is movies, the film industry, and what better way to do that since the year is over than to look at the biggest hits and flops of the box office in 2022. Now, to do so, I'm going to be using a Variety article, and because I know that I'm often talking about left-wing bias this, right-wing bias that, agendas and woke propagandas and movies and video games and TV shows, I wanted to use Variety because all sides considers them center. So they don't really have a leaning. I guess we should keep that in mind when we go through this article and take a look at what they say and how they present these films. Let's go. When Everything Everywhere All at Once premiered last spring, Alamo Drafthouse offered special screenings where attendees were gifted with packets of googly eyes. Yes, they did. It was very cool. Alamo Drafthouse always does things like that, by the way. It's a super cool, completely off topic. I remember when I went to a re-release of one of my favorite films of all time, Army of Darkness, and you know those little foam fingers they give you at sporting events? Well, they gave us like foam chainsaws to put on our hand. Oh, I love Alamo. It is, aside from going to the drive-in, which there's very few left, but anytime I get the chance to go to one, I love going. Alamo is the only theater I'll go to. Anyway, let's continue. The Peepers were a reference to a central character's habit of putting the gag item on everyone and everything he can. Then, when Nope, Jordan Peele's twisty horror film, opened in July, not near as big a fan of this movie. It's good. It's technically a good movie, but I just don't really care for Jordan Peele's directing style, if I'm being honest. The Texas-based theater chain hosted a pop-up screening at a horse ranch in Hollywood. It was a sly nod to the equine-wrangling siblings at the center of the extraterrestrial thriller. And when The Menu, a horror film that sends up haute cuisine, debuted last November, man, I did want to see that. I haven't seen it yet. Alamo offered up a multi-course feast featuring slow-poached oysters and biodynamic wines for guests so they could dine in style as the characters on screen were killed off with panache. "We're doing everything we can to bring people back to the movies," says Sarah Peter, the lead film programmer at Alamo Drafthouse. "We're passionate about movies, and we want to do more to maximize the content we're showing. It's about rebuilding that relationship with our customers." Going the extra mile appears to be paying off. As a result, in a roller coaster year for movies, Alamo has outperformed the industry by double digits. It's a reminder of the kind of hustle that was necessary at the time when the movie business struggled, and largely failed, to regain its post-pandemic footing. Well, okay. It is a post-pandemic, yes, but I really hope they don't think it's failing because of the pandemic. This is one of those biased things that could go either way. I hope not to see. Frankly, as a moviegoer, as somebody who loves movies, the movie theater is my church. This year was just kind of a crappy year for movies, but anyway. Overall, domestic ticket sales plunged more than 30% in 2022 from pre-COVID levels, and analysts expect the stateside revenues will top out at just over $7.5 billion. That's largely due to the fact that studios released 40 fewer films over the last 12 months than they did in 2019. Right, so many things are going direct to streaming, and to me, that just ruins the experience. As they labor to get projects back into production in the midst of an unpredictable health crisis, the drop in theatrical releases equated to roughly the same shortfall in revenue declines. Theaters need movies to show, and for much of 2022, there were too many blank space in the marquees. "It was definitely a rebound year," says Turloch Hutchinson, VP of Film at Studio Movie Grill. "There's still a lack of product from the studios, and it's going to take a while to change that. Movie theater owners believe that next summer will be stronger, and the release of sequels including The Guardians of the Galaxy and The Fast and the Furious. However, they don't expect things will return to pre-pandemic levels until 2024. Well, they will, if you put out good movies. If you look at Top Gun and Avatar, those were both multi-billion-dollar movies. One is $1.5 billion, and the other's a little over $1 billion right now, that projected to maybe make as much as $2 billion. So, if you put out movies that people want to see, you will make those numbers back. That's a long time to wait for businesses that have been hit hard by an extended shutdown and shifting tastes as viewers get more accustomed to watching on streaming services. It's already resulting in closures and bankruptcies. Cineworld, the owner of Regal and the second biggest exhibitor in the world, filed for Chapter 11 protection in September. "You're going to see a wave of bankruptcies," predicts one executive who spoke on the condition of anonymity. "Private equity will probably come in, buy some of these theaters, and shut down their underperforming screens and cut costs. They're not going away, but it's going to be rough." COVID and politics have fundamentally altered a business that, let's face it, was retracting even before the virus upended things. No, it wasn't. It wasn't retracting. People loved going to the movies. Avengers Endgame became literally the biggest movie of all time. Now, You could say that movies in general were retracting because everyone just wanted to see cape shit. And yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I go to the movies. I rarely go to see superhero movies. I just don't care. When I go to the movies, yeah, largely there is no large audience because I'm going to see these niche things that no one wants to see because I'm kind of an elitist. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, or Rocket Man. Both great movies. Both did relatively good numbers, if I remember right. But they weren't bringing in no Spider-Man No Way Home numbers. It was an industry that had become reliant on spectacle and superheroes, exactly, to sell tickets, and those cost a lot of money to deliver, but they don't have to. That's the thing, you don't have to make a $15 million budget movie or a $100 million budget movie. As long as you make a good movie with an okay budget, you're going to sell tickets. People don't realize that Star Wars, back when it came out, was a mid-budget movie, on the low end of mid-budget at that. But they were innovators, and they cared about the craft, and they cared about the story. People go to see movies if the word of mouth is good. Top Gun Maverick was literally a word of mouth film, and it stayed in theaters for like, what, 4-6 months? It was bananas. And that was a movie that was a sequel to something from the 80s, like a 30 or 40 year later sequel. It's not like people were scrambling for the nostalgia of Top Gun. They saw the movie. It wasn't a superhero movie, didn't have a bunch of woke, political, agenda-driven ideology in it, and by word of mouth, it became amazing. Frankly, all this political agenda crap has kind of turned me into a Tom Cruise fan, because he seems to be the only one making movies that don't have it anymore, and I used to hate Tom Cruise, I'll be honest. As a result, the great changes that have taken place in a diminished global landscape for theatrical releases are making it increasingly difficult for movies to turn a profit. Russia's invasion of Ukraine means that Hollywood films are no longer released in the country. That's a blow considering that Russia is one of the 10 largest markets for movies. Even more troubling, tensions between the US and China have resulted in fewer studio films getting into the country. Okay, let's talk about the real reason they're not getting put into the country. China is a very racist nation. And quite a sexist nation as well, and kind of a bigoted nation sexually as well. And with more movies being forced to put political agendas and ideologies in their films that, always casting minorities and uplifting them and putting a bunch of sexual orientations in film and focusing on queerness, I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I'm saying that the Chinese government doesn't like to see that stuff, and so when a movie has an abundance of gay stuff in it or an abundance of black characters, it either gets canceled or heavily altered. I mean, I've talked about it on this channel before. We all know what happened to Chadwick Boseman on the Black Panther poster where they covered up his face. That way, Chinese people would still go see it in hopes that it covered up the fact that they were, black. Bill Maher said it best. He straight up said when talking about Hollywood, we're not racist. We just have to pretend to be racist because we're capitalist. Because he was talking about how America wanted to get its movies in China because that's where a bulk of money was made, and that's why they weren't casting as many diverse individuals or queer individuals or whatever. Bill Maher called this out years ago. So yes, they're not getting into the country because of that, not because of any tensions between yes, there are tensions between the US and China, but it's the diversity and LGBT stuff, and China doesn't want it. And frankly, America doesn't want it either. If you look at box office numbers, when movies that are pushing that stuff are underperforming by a lot. Remember that movie, Bros? The super gay movie that even gay people didn't go see? And the country's rocketing rates of COVID may have negatively impacted the results for Avatar: The Way of Water, one of the rare Hollywood productions to get a coveted release date in China. That's a problem because for a major blockbuster with a budget of more than $200 million, doing well in a massive market like China can be the difference between turning a profit and losing money. China has been tumultuous, to say the least, says Veronica Kwan Vonderberg, president of the distribution for Universal Pictures International. There's still a lot of opportunity in China, but it's never a guarantee. It's more of a cherry on top. Which is in stark contrast to how things were going for Marvel pre-pandemic, when, China was totally cool with it. But Marvel pre-pandemic was also far less woke. So, it was also a year of shifting fortunes, illustrated most dramatically by Paramount Pictures, which had been largely written off as a major player after a decade of corporate changes and instability. Instead, Paramount surged back into contention, fielding the year's highest-grossing release in Top Gun Maverick, and rounding out with such hits as Sonic the Hedgehog 2, The Lost City, Smile, and Scream. Babylon, Damien Chazelle's $80 million look at the early days of the movie business, was its lone flop, which everything I know about this movie, and someone like me who loves old Hollywood, the silent film or the 30s, 40s black and white era, I really want to watch this movie. It's, from everything I've heard, completely self-indulgent of Hollywood basically just sucking its own dick from the past, but man, do I want to see it. But yeah, if that's its only flop, I mean, Top Gun Maverick, I've already talked about. Sonic 2. I almost wore a Sonic the Hedgehog 2 shirt for this video because we were going to be talking about movies, and I loved it. It was truly a fantastic year, says Brian Robbins, Paramount Pictures president and CEO, and I did feel like we were living in an alternative universe. Man, you're supposed to say alternate universe. Indeed, Paramount's experience seemed to unfold into another reality. Even as it prospered, most of their studios were saddled with painful failures. Disney missed the mark with its two animated features, A Strange World and Lightyear, both of which bombed at the box office and likely lost more than $100 million apiece. Once again, because of woke ideology and pandering, Disney didn't even advertise Strange World. No marketing at all. They just let that one flop because, yeah, they knew we weren't going to go see it. And Lightyear, I'll be honest, Toy Story is my favorite Disney movie. Yeah, I know it's Pixar, but Disney, you get it. Toy Story is my favorite Disney movie of all time. According to my aunt and granny, my very first word was in fact Woody. So all I'm saying is that by them not bringing back Tim Allen, they lost me. And there was a lot of people in that same camp. Their collapse spells trouble for family features, which has been one of the most reliable theatrical demographics before COVID upended things. There were also several attempts to launch or extend new franchises that collided with audience indifference, such as Warner Bros., Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore. It turned out that nobody cared about where to find them. Nobody cared about that, probably because of all the Johnny Depp controversy surrounding it. No one's talked about how that had a big part to play. Black Adam, which saw DC's new leadership announce that Dwayne Johnson's anti-hero would not play a role in the next phase of its universe building, and Lionsgate's Moonfall, a disaster flick that cost more than $140 million to produce and earned a catastrophic $67.3 million. It's because people are over Roland Emmerich. I'm sorry, his movies are trash. Independence Day is fun. I think that's it. Did he do Day After Tomorrow? If he did The Day After Tomorrow, that's good. That's actually a good movie. But other than that, Roland Emmerich is just a crap director that nobody likes and has fond memories of his one good movie from the 90s. Again, two if he did The Day After Tomorrow. Prestige fare, the kind of title's positioned to win awards, also had a rough go at the box office. Films like She Said and Bones and All and The Fabelmans earned critical raves but failed to turn those reviews into lines at the multiplexes. They always do. Oscar nod movies are always disasters. Well, not always. Oftentimes are disasters. Those are literally movies made for the Oscars, made for Hollywood, like Babylon, to suck itself off to. Those films have yet to earn $15 million globally, a dismal result that could mean the movies aimed at adults, at least ones that don't feature special effects and explosions, will continue to migrate to streaming services where they will be better insulated from commercial considerations. So what worked? Franchises, particularly ones with comic book connection, continue to dominate the box office. Domestically, 9 of the top 10 grossing films were sequels. The one entry that didn't come with a Roman numeral, The Batman, wasn't exactly an original movie. It's a reboot of a character that's headlined more than a dozen films. And what worked for US crowds also delivered for international ticket buyers. Globally, 8 of the highest grossing films were also sequels, The Batman and Chinese sci-fi comedy Moon Man proving to be the exception to the rule. These films accounted for a disproportionate amount of box office revenue. In 2022, the box office is more heavily concentrated at the top, with 10 of the biggest grossing films contributing to over 60% of the overall ticket sales compared to 47% in 2019. Yes, but like you said above, 40 fewer films were released this year, so that probably has to be taken into account when dissecting those numbers. And that's a problem because these major movies are supposed to be the big draws, but for the business to keep humming, there have to be more complementary pieces. Studios always focused on home runs, but the singles, doubles, and triples kept the distribution channels going, said Greg Foster, an exhibition industry consultant. In 2022, there simply weren't enough wide releases. Yeah, they say studios focus on the home runs, but to be fair, several famous movies weren't thought to be home runs, or they didn't think were going to be home runs. Everyone thought that Forrest Gump was going to flop. It became one of the most famous, successful movies of all time. Same for the Titanic. At the time it came out, the most successful movie of all time, and still in the top 5, I believe. And while the summer box office got off to a hot start with Top Gun Maverick, and built on that success with hits such as Jurassic World Dominion. What an awful film. And Minions: The Rise of Gru, the business entered a prolonged slowdown in August, one it hasn't really recovered from as the year ends. To be sure, there have been a few big hits, such as Black Panther Wakanda Forever and Avatar The Way of Water, but those successes haven't been enough to lift other new releases. They've also been few and far between. For too long, there weren't any big movies to show. As a result, the likes of Bros, Devotion, and Easter Sunday suffered some of the worst wide-release debuts in the history of movies. But that's the thing. Big movies like Avatar crush small movies at the box office. Bros, the movie I talked about earlier, came out at a time when it had no competition. It should have done great, but people didn't want to see it. They didn't care. If you don't market your movie, or your movie just isn't made for anyone in particular, they're not going to go see it. I mean, you could say Bros was made for the gay community, but even gay people didn't show up to see it. It literally is one of the biggest flops of the year. And if you're making a movie almost exclusively for the gay community, whether you like to admit it or not, it's a relatively small community compared to the whole. It's what, 7% of the population? If you're going to make a movie for 7 to 9% of the population, it needs to be a small budget, probably more art house, indie style film that you would see at a film festival, not something that you're going to see on the big screen released to the masses. You know, maybe one of those 3 or 4 day event films like the movie Love by Angels and Airwaves was. We had some problematic lulls in 2022, said Megan Culligan, president of IMAX Entertainment. Having a lull in August happens all the time. You can live through it. But when November and December are lulls, that's not good. As for theater executives like Peter, they're already looking ahead to the coming months, hoping to find kind of offbeat or unconventional offerings that can draw crowds and serve as a bridge until the next blockbuster. She thinks they may have found one in Cocaine Bear. Yeah, I can't wait to see that. That's going to be great. A darkly comic thriller about a black bear who ingests a lot of blow and goes on a murderous rampage. We've got some pretty wild ideas for parties we can have in the lobbies of our theaters, says Peter. That's the kind of movie we love. And yeah, that's the kind of movie I love too. Movies like that. Movies without agendas. Movies that aren't out to try and make you feel bad for the way you think or prove a point about society as a whole. That's why I go to the movies. It's for escapism. So when you're jamming that stuff down my throat, I don't care. And clearly I'm not alone, because a lot of people seem not to care when they're not going to the movies and seeing things like Bros. Or honestly, like Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Look, we can talk about how it made $700 million, but A, that's still $300 million less than the first one made, and B, the dollar is worth less now, so when you adjust for inflation, it's an even bigger gap. No, Black Panther didn't actually do well. We don't want to say it did. Disney definitely wants us to think it did because they don't want to acknowledge the superhero fad is over. But no, Black Panther really didn't do well. Nor should it have. It was a crap film. All in all, I'm not really afraid of movie theaters going the way of JFK because I think they will bounce back. But hopefully what it takes for them to bounce back is us not going and showing Hollywood we don't care about woke propaganda movies. We want to go see things like Cocaine Bear. So guys, assuming there's no woke propaganda bogus in Cocaine Bear, go see it. Show the industry that the way to generate revenue is to just make fun, off-the-wall films that we can all appreciate. There will always be room for the classic art film that only 10 people besides myself will go see. But for the masses, let's just stop with the cape shit and do more movies like Cocaine Bear or the upcoming Winnie the Pooh murder movie. Or even do more things that are based off IPs but aren't superhero related. I already talked in a previous video how I'd like to see a Detective Pikachu sequel. Where are we on that? You best believe that when Mario Bros comes out, I'll be first in line to see it. When Cocaine Bear comes out, you'll find me at the Alamo. And until then, please tell me what movies that you're excited to go see this upcoming year in the comments below. Also, you can tell me on Twitter by following me at BoltTheWord. And if you'd be so kind as to subscribe, that would mean the world to me because I'm really trying to grow this channel, and so far things have been going pretty great. I'd like you to help with that, and I'd like to get my message out to even more people because this has been Words of Paradise.